If you're a marketer or business owner, you already know TV advertising is a powerful channel for business growth. It's also a solution for businesses frustrated by digital marketing's rising cost. But the traditional process for launching TV campaigns is expensive, time-consuming, and complex. Marketing Architects believes brands deserve access to quality TV campaigns. That's why they flipped the traditional TV agency model on its head to create all-inclusive TV. With all-inclusive TV advertising, Marketing Architects invest their own money to produce, analyze, and optimize your TV campaign. All you pay for is media. This means you get top-tier solutions for every piece of your campaign, but without the dramatic price tag, setting you up for rapid growth at an extreme cost advantage. In fact, all-inclusive TV is so revolutionary, they wrote a book about it. If you're a marketer, business leader, or interested in the TV advertising industry, you'll want to grab a copy of All-Inclusive TV, How Booming Brands Are Reimagining TV Advertising. Read how other brands use TV to transform their businesses and how you can do the same. Go to marketingarchitects.com/book to get your free copy today. Again, that's marketingarchitects.com/book. You know, I've been talking about earned media value for quite some time on this podcast. My friends at Eisenberg have just raised the bar on earned media benchmarks with their Social Index. Social Index now gives you globally earned media values across a growing list of 6 geographies for all your KPIs across the top 7 social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. You can now visualize these values for deeper analysis, and they have a look-back window over 2 years of historical comparisons. Social Index is updated daily. Don't get stuck with old data. Over 1,000 companies have used the Social Index to understand the ROI of their social campaigns. And if you work with a social agency, you should demand they incorporate earned media values into your reports. Get your earned media value for social content. Visit earnedmediavalues.com/Alan. Again, that's earnedmediavalues.com/ALAN.
For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today. Today on the show, I've got Pam Forbus. She's the Chief Marketing Officer at Pernod Ricard North America, and she became the CMO in July of 2020, overseeing the marketing strategy for the company's portfolio of leading premium spirit brands. Prior to Pernod Ricard, Pam was at the Walt Disney Studios, where she was Senior Vice President of Customer Experience, Data Science, and Insights. She led a centralized team responsible for insights, market research, marketing and media analytics, business intelligence, consumer data strategy, and the studio's CRM and loyalty marketing program. Prior to Disney, she spent nearly 2 decades at PepsiCo and Frito-Lay, shaping global brands, analytics, consumer and shopper insights. On the show today, we talk about Pam's transition from insights leader and executive to CMO, what it's like to be CMO today, and especially of a portfolio of very storied brands like Absolut and Jameson and Kahlua, among many others, and where she's focused today, both as it coming out of the pandemic as well as what changed during the pandemic, and much, much more. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Pam Forbus. Pam, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, it's not every day that I have somebody on the show that is related to 2 signers of the Declaration of Independence. Tell me about that.
Yes, family's quite proud of it. We, George Ross and George Reed, both were signers of the Declaration, and we are related. George Ross, actually, his nephew married Betsy Ross. So, there's whole history there of founding fathers, and I'd say rebels.
That's funny. So let's talk about your career and your path, and where'd you get your start? And then kind of what's been your path to become CMO at Pernod Ricard? North America.
Funny, it's great being at this stage in your career. I'm 30 plus years in to step back and think about how did I get here? Because it was not really on purpose. It was just sort of by chance, a number of left turns, and here I am, which I'm thrilled. I never thought I'd achieve what I've achieved. It's been great. Very humble beginnings. My parents are public school teachers. My dad's an art teacher. Mom's a kindergarten teacher. They really couldn't help me much in guiding my career advice, and all I can say is they instilled in me a love of learning and a love of the creative arts. So I grew up really interested in lots of things, good in sports, good in math, good in school, but didn't really have one thing that stood out. And I had an art scholarship, almost went to art school, but my dad was like, you don't really handle rejection very well. And life of an artist is tough. So I happened to have a friend whose father was a leader at one of the ad agencies. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, or suburbs, and he was leading the Lincoln Mercury account at Y&R. And I spent a day in high school with my friend and went through the agency, and I fell in love. I just was like, this is where I need to be. Got some really crazy advice. The head of media told me to learn stenography so I could become a secretary and work my way up. And I didn't take that advice, but I did. I did want to get to business school, but I had been just hell bent on getting a job at Y&R, and I wrote letters every year to different people at the agency saying, "Here's what I'm up to. Here's what I'm doing." And I graduated on a Friday, started Monday in the mailroom. That's what you did back then.
That's amazing. Tell me a little bit more, like how long were you in the agency world before switching to marketing side?
Having worked on automotive accounts, some big accounts, really, some great big budgets, right? And we were doing, unique things. I remember when the information highway came about, and that's what we called it, at first. And it's like, should we get on the information highway, the internet? And we were the first to start exploring in that space because they had big budgets. So loved it, but I hopped around different agencies. And when I worked at Chiat Day on the Infinity account, that's when I discovered account planning, like real strategy and brand planning and consumer insights. And I was like, I want to do that. That was like a real passion. And it was really hard to make a switch from account to account planning. And I kept trying and I kept working on projects, but it was a hard switch to make. So happened to have a great situation where my husband at the time was asked to open an office in Dallas for Cadillac and different, it was the can't even remember. It got all those agencies get bought up, but it was technically a division of Leo Burnett. But I took a year off and I went back to school. I did some contract work. I was trying to break out of the ad agency world and worked at a small market research firm. And I just kept exploring until I landed a 20-hour-a-week contracting job at Frito-Lay, which was it's a 3-month assignment. They had just bought Cracker Jack, and they wanted to do some research analysis and synthesis of some work that had been already done. And within a month, I had it done, and within 2 months, they hired me. But I had to move from I was SVP at an agency leading an account to an associate manager, a third pay cut to break into client side and a whole new discipline that I really had no experience in, but I had done enough. I'd gotten my certification from University of Georgia. I just did everything I could to try to break into the strategy side of marketing. And within 7 years, I was head of the research department at Frito-Lay, and then I got the big job to lead all of global insights for PepsiCo for 3 years. So it worked out for me, but lots of twists and turns along the way. And I like to talk about adversity advantage. It was the toughest times and the toughest years that catapulted my career. So the '08 financial crisis, all of a sudden, my team was being asked completely different questions. It wasn't so much about ad testing and consumer research anymore. It was what's driving demand? What's driving the business? Are people becoming more health conscious and snacking less? And we did all this work, and I had to do modeling work and brought in new vendors. And I love the math side of the business. And it was the thing that catapulted my career to the big PepsiCo role, is that myself and the CMO at the time, Ann Mukherjee, tore apart the business, figured out a lot of what we were doing was self-inflicted with different pricing actions we were taking that was slowing demand. And we revamped the entire growth strategy to be consumer-centered on demand versus what we can make. And we turned the business around. And within 2 years, Indra was talking about it in analyst calls about our demand-centric growth strategy. And it was a wild ride. So Ann and I are still together. I work for her today. She's the CEO of my company. So that's been a great relationship.
Yeah, that sounds like a good partnership too. Just over the years, you've seen a lot together.
We have. She's a fierce warrior. I love to dream and think, and I call my talents are about seeing possibilities. Hers is making the impossible possible because she's a warrior. She's a communicator. She can rally a whole organization behind change, and you need both to make big things happen. So we are quite the 1-2 combo, I believe.
It sounds like it. You've spent a ton of time in insights and research and analytics side, the math side, so to speak, of the business. How do you think that prepared you for the CMO role?
Well, I actually didn't think I'd be a CMO, to be honest. I called myself the CMO whisperer. Again, I don't see data and analytics. I don't see it as the math side. I know it is the math side, but all that data is consumer data. Whether it's tracking data, behavioral data, modeling data, it's all based in consumer behavior. So I see data as being consumer centric. I think the light went off for me, after reading about and watching the movie Moneyball, right? Like you can you can call yourself consumer centric, but unless you're making decisions based on the data, you're not really consumer centric. You might want to have consumer empathy and you might want to know about the consumer and learn about the consumer. But if you're really consumer centric, you're making decisions based on that consumer data, and they're not always the ones you want to make. They're the ones that you should make. So I like to call myself the Moneyball marketer. And it's hard because you get really attached to some of the programs that you're working on or campaigns you're working on, and they're not doing well. And you have to cut bait and go fix them. And when you're attached to them, it's really hard to do. At least now that I'm in this seat, it's hard to do. I'm realizing how hard it is.
Right. No, it makes sense. It does make sense. I mean, and there, to your point about maybe not thinking about it as the math side, I mean, I've spent a good bit of my career in that space as well. And there's an art to it as well. A lot of times I try to equate it to, I don't know if you've used this analogy as well, but with marketers that maybe are less analytically inclined, I'm like, yes, I do speak the language of finance from time to time, but finance is all built on assumptions. And where did those assumptions come from? A lot of times it's gut feel or, benchmark data that we've got, but it's not like a rock hard science at the end of the day, even though it's numerical.
No, even your, hardcore modeling and AI, like there's definitely an art. You have to make choices in the math that you're doing and you improve over time. At least that's what I find. You hone that model and you get it more accurate and more fine-tuned to your needs or your category. So typically, having spent several decades in the research and analytics field, typically don't like to buy things right off the shelf. Vendors like to sell them because they're highly profitable. They've already got a product to sell. But every category is a bit of a different dynamic. Snacks doesn't behave like sodas, and none of them behave like alcohol. So you have to understand your category and that consumer dynamic.
Oh, it makes sense. Let's talk about Pernod Ricard a little bit. You've got an amazing portfolio of brands from things like Absolute to Jameson, Kahlua, and many others. What were you surprised about most when you joined? Because to your point, you've been in snacks before. I think there was a small stint at Walt Disney as well, and the agency world. Alcohol is a whole new beast. So what surprised you?
I was surprised first at healthy profits, healthy budgets for marketing, that's for sure, which was great, but surprisingly little spent in media. Like anywhere from 25 to 30% of your total budget was only spent in media, which I wasn't used to. I was used to media being the engine of stimulating demand, whether it's drumming up tickets to go to the movies or impulse buys for snacks. So making sure you're top of mind, that recency theory of media. And so I was surprised. And the business is complex. So you've got a lot of your business in bars and restaurants, a lot of your business in stores. But I think the industry overspent in experiential touch points. So festivals, events, sponsorships, stadiums, deals, even bar activations, which is only about 25 to 30% of the business. And COVID has got smaller even. So the prevailing thought is that you build a brand in a bar and then you sell it in stores. Having come from CPG, I was like, I don't know if that's true. Maybe some brands, some brands in their early infancy you learn about in a bar. Maybe certain categories are more prone to that. But with your mass brands like an Absolute or a Malibu, like I think media can work. And so we went and did the foundational work to find what drives choice, what is the path to purchase, a large study, large sample sizes. And we learned that actually in the US especially, your spirits purchases are very highly planned. And you think about it, it's some states you have to go to a state-run store. So it's not an easy shopping experience for the shopper. And then you get there or you go to that local liquor store. Again, it's not an easy shopping experience. So probably are thinking about, I'm going to go once. What do I have to get so I don't have to go multiple times, right? And so you make that list and you have the brand on your list. So to me, that said, wow, this is highly susceptible to media, pre-point of purchase stimulation. So we made a major shift and more than doubled our media in the first year and then another 50% the next year. So we've been working on, we had to have campaigns to run, we had to have content. So by the time you create the content and shift some of the spending, that was the biggest surprise. And it's working. We've got our model set up. We're understanding, what's driving our growth. It's still a lot of growth due to sales distribution, but our media is affecting velocity. Not on all brands. We've got some to figure out.
Right. Well, I mean, to your point, there's two levers: the push through the channel, so to speak, from the sales perspective, but the pull through that you're creating with the media is pretty interesting. And I want to talk about the pandemic in another minute, but we'll talk about that and how that shifted things as well. But that seems like a really smart strategy, frankly, and in line with thinking from like Ehrenberg Bass or mental availability and those types of things, making sure that the brand is fresh with them. Because I'm probably going to date myself, but like Absolute was like all the rage when I was younger, probably below drinking age technically. And then it kind of fell out. And I was like, I always wondered where'd it go? Like, it's still a good brand. Like, and it just, you never saw it for years.
Well, I agree. This industry does a lot of buying and selling of brands to different holding companies. I'll just say that. And so different leaders take over, just unfortunately, some of these brands get just sort of lost for a while. Absolute, again, I grew up on that brand. I remember my first business trip at Y&R. This is how we order drinks at the airport. Absolute tonic. But there's a lot of latent love and demand for the brand. People just like, yeah, I used to love that brand, right? So what is it about the brand? One of the things we did as soon as I came on board was to really go deep. I call it the DNA of each brand. What is that brand's timeless story? That no matter what, it's just in that brand's DNA. And then let's figure out how to tell it in a timely way. We can't tell it like we used to tell it back in the day, right? We have to tell it in a way that's unique and on point for today. And Absolute's one that's always been on the forefront of culture and in the zeitgeist of what's happening. So we've got to let Absolute go a little more aggressive in having a voice. So I think you may have heard we launched in 2020 Sex Responsibly. And it talked about alcohol's role in consent. The time, if you think about Me Too and all that movement, like you can't use alcohol as an excuse. So that was a pretty risque campaign at the time. And of course, Absolute has a right to say that. It's sort of been there. So, and then we moved on. We call these instigation acts. They're not part of a content marketing. They're more of a instigation PR and comms effort around our efforts. And then we did a Vote Responsibly, which was a little stunt. We actually ran a television ad during the election. Vote first, drink second, Absolute. Vote responsibly. So sex responsibly, vote responsibly. And then when things started opening up again last spring, we launched Mix Responsibly, which of the three, it got the most earned media. I think it just hit a tone in culture that said, we're all coming back out. We have to respect each other's wishes. I wear a mask, you don't. We're going to mix responsibly. And so we have something like 2 billion impressions. So that's been fun trying to get Absolute again back in culture. Just recently, this past 2 weekends, Absolute was back at Coachella. And I didn't know this, but Absolute was a sponsor of Coachella for 10 years. And again, one of those touch points that I'm not sure has a strong ROI, but we were in this contract. So let's see how we can maximize it. How do I get more reach, more awareness, more impact for this little brand activation in a tent, that has a little disco and a little selling cocktails? Like, how do I get more for it? And the team came back and said, what if we launched a similar experience in the metaverse and had a virtual and physical experience going on simultaneously? So we did that. And then we went on media interviews. And in the first weekend, we got 1.2 billion impressions of earned media just for being again, metaverse is a hot topic. Everyone's talking about it. What is it? It's like, as long as people can associate, there's Absolute again on sort of the edge of what's happening. That's sort of the approach. It's exhausting work, though. It takes a lot of people to put these kinds of campaigns together.
Well, and it has to be timely too, right? You're trying to capitalize on both an event as well as, if you will, trends that are going on around in the general cultural zeitgeist, I guess, for lack of a better word. Well, let's talk about a couple other things too. There's this notion of premiumization, I guess is the best way to talk about it. And tell me about that trend with consumers and what you're seeing.
It's a fascinating trend. We haven't really seen it in any other category. Working with a few consultants, they're like, wow, this is very interesting, where if you divide the category into price tiers, really high end, ultra premium, super premium, prestige, and then sort of mainstream and value, the segments that are growing the fastest are the highest end. So consumers are trading up to more quality, higher premium priced spirits. You can see that with really high-end whiskeys or high-end tequilas. The tequila trend is really definitely accelerating that. But even, vodka and gin, you'll see a premiumization happening, which is great leverage for any business, for sure. If you're playing in those price tiers, that is. Launching innovation is a bit easier too. You're able to command a little bit more of a price premium, right? So I think what's happening underneath it, consumers are learning that maybe those $15 cocktails I can make at home with the really good stuff.
Right. Right. Yes.
Same price. There's also just how I want to, spend my disposable income. Maybe I'm not traveling as much, but I'm going to splurge on a really high-end whiskey or tequila at home. So, and just collecting even is a big deal as well. So it is a fascinating. And we keep seeing if it's going to slow down, but it really isn't.
I mean, related to that, it's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my personal life. My mother, who is, what is she, 69 now, I think? Yes, I think that's right. I should know. Sorry, Mom. But her friend, like best friend that she's had for, I don't know, decades and decades, to the point where I call her aunt. Even though she's not related, she started collecting whiskey and she doesn't drink. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's got probably the best bourbon collection I've ever seen, and she doesn't drink. And so I'm just hoping, that one day the gifts start rolling into my house, because I will gladly drink all of it.
That's funny. I remember reading a newspaper article. Someone's father had gifted him whiskey every year of his life and then sold it all and paid for his college tuition. That stuff appreciates. It's not like,
it does. Yeah. Well, so premiumization, making more upgrading, if you will, when you're making a drink at home, that kind of takes us to the pandemic, because I know my consumption shifted dramatically, obviously. Like, we weren't going to bars or restaurants really, then sitting there. And we started finding, I think first it was cocktail kits and boxes, subscription boxes, and you still had to go buy the spirits to make the cocktail with. But we haven't dropped that yet. Like we're still doing that here. What are you seeing?
We definitely stocked our bars. We saw a huge pull through early in the pandemic where people were stocking their bars, and we keep waiting for like the floor to fall out because people aren't restocking, but they're restocking, and they are also going back out to restaurants. So it's quite an interesting shift in behavior around in-home consumption. We definitely fueled by a renewed interest in mixology. It's almost like it's like cooking. You can make so many different things with different spirits and cocktails. I didn't know you could make cocktails using, wine and champagne as well, which is some really good cocktails. So I learned a lot. I think everyone was learning a lot. There were some master classes on mixology, I think, even on the Apple platform. So it became really interesting and fun in-home entertainment. And I'd say the pandemic also accelerated more e-commerce because they had to. They're probably the last to kind of adopt home delivery of spirits. And once you could do that, we already talked about how horrible the shopping experience is for this category. So if I can just click and have it delivered or click and pick up, we saw a massive increase in e-commerce, and even things like cocktails to go for restaurants. You could order out, and that was like laws had to be changed to make that happen. And some of them have changed permanently to allow it to continue. So a lot of things made it easier, and then at the expense, unfortunately, probably of continued expense of beer. The fastest growing categories today, however, are pre-made cocktails. So consumers are deciding maybe that's a little complicated. I have people coming over. I need to make them faster. I need pre-batched. So pre-made cocktails and ready to drink, like in cans, spirits. Cocktails are on fire right now. So we just launched a Jameson ginger and lime. We've got a line of Malibu and Absolute cocktails, and cans are just growing like crazy. So
yeah, I mean, it seems like consumer behavior has changed to a large degree, but it's benefited the category regardless. Like it just feels like the category has grown.
It has, yeah. Probably at the expense of beer to a degree. I think beer was in wine somewhat. It was just convenient, right? Open a bottle, open a can. Now I've got more time at home, so I can experiment with these spirits. But now that things are kind of opening back up, you can see convenience entering spirits.
We've talked about, curious how all these trends are impacting marketing, and you talked about like your shift for certain brands to focus on media. You've got these instigations that you talked about, which are, I'm going to shortchange it, and I hope this is okay, but like it's really about earned and cultural impact potentially. And then you've got the e-commerce or the online shopping component as well. Like, how are you adjusting marketing?
It's a great question. And it goes to what is the role of a CMO anymore? It's not just content. It's so complex. We've got innovation we're launching. We've got real supply chain issues. We're shipping from other countries into the US, and things are stuck in ports. So we have supply chain issues. You don't want to stimulate demand if you have out of stock. So you've got to coordinate that demand supply situation. I work very closely with operations on that, believe it or not. And then modern marketing is so complex. I am not the expert. So I built a leadership team that is very cross-functional and has embedded centers of excellence. So my brand management teams are actually quite small. They have to orchestrate across different teams to get their marketing done. So we have experts in media, experts in in-house studio to do dynamic content. So that content factory to do media in a modern way, where I'm loading a DCO to change headlines to be very contextually relevant. Then I have a culture and inclusive marketing team of 6 people who are experts in looking at every piece of content to make sure we're appropriate and inclusive, but also culturally relevant for the targets we're trying to reach. I've got a team who's all about in-store and trade and shopper marketing. And we have what's called a media to shelf programming that we're attempting to do, so that it's just one voice from the brand. Believe it or not, that wasn't happening. Our field sales team used to be able to, kind of do whatever they wanted with the brands. And now we've got a very orchestrated media to shelf system to make sure we are sweating those assets all the way through. But, I have a finance partner, insights, analytics, legal, operations, and we meet weekly on, whatever the hot issues are of the day. But it's a team sport anymore, and it's very complicated. So you have to bring in experts, and I'm not the expert. I just bring in the talent that I think we need to make it all happen and let them go. We just had a wonderful share out yesterday to all of our brand companies like Irish Distillers in Ireland and The Absolute Company in Sweden about our modern marketing machine and how we're seeing real results now of the efforts we're making. It was a nice culmination of 2 years of work putting it together.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, you talk about the role of CMO, and it's a very complex role. There's also like a lot of things that you're facing, things like data and transparency issues. How are you thinking about that, if you will, at Pernod Ricard?
Yeah, so we have a great global IT team that has steeped in that. And I brought in a local expert who came from OMD Media, and we are building a whole data capability and CRM capability. Imagine, so when we were at Coachella, 130 people walked through the tent swiping their band, all opt-in, right? Privacy compliant. We definitely need to build our own first-party data capabilities. It's hard because we don't really have a relationship with our end consumer, but you can create data sharing agreements with retailers or platforms to, again, in clean rooms, be able to find audiences and orchestrate content that's more relevant, more sequential to, the consumer's buying behavior. That's what we're doing. We ran tests in last quarter and saw huge results. So we just have to create this content factory. We're talking about tens of thousands of combinations of content that is just overwhelming. You have to program it all to orchestrate seamlessly while you're sleeping, right?
Right. Exactly. Not an easy task, because at the end of the day, I mean, a content is still a creative element, right? And it has to be interpreted and hopefully seen as good by a human, even though a machine is probably helping to make it. Yeah, that's a difficult one. It's a difficult one.
We see like the littlest things can make a difference. And, you probably heard about it, but like, do we show ads more in the daytime or more in the evening? And, your daytime headline could be a little different than your evening headline. And so not surprising, it was like almost twice the lift if you do it in the daytime. Why is that? Oh, you're probably priming the occasion versus being there in the occasion. That makes sense. But we're playing with all of those different variables to see what makes a difference.
Well, before we transition and talk a little bit more about you and reflect on you as a person, we talked about this at the beginning almost, this relationship between the CMO and the CEO, and the fact that you guys have your relationship, you've worked together before, but I'm curious for other CMOs or heads of marketing that are listening to this, like, what do you feel like are the elements that make that relationship successful?
That's a great question. First of all, I am blessed to have a CEO who understands marketing. I think that's a problem, right? That a lot of CEOs coming either from a strict finance or sales background just may not have the understanding of how complex and nuanced marketing can be. Everyone's an expert in marketing. My dad tells me what's working, what's not working on my stuff.
Yes, exactly.
But that's one. Two, the CMOs need to speak you talk about, I speak finance. You need to be able to speak the language of business. A lot of CMOs get caught up in what I call vanity metrics, like shares, my share of conversation on social media. I think those are vanity metrics. That isn't something your head of sales is going to get excited about. What am I doing to drive business growth? So we talk a lot about driving brand choice. It's definitely brand marketing and it's definitely brand equity building, but it's about brand choice. We want people to walk in choosing the brands that we have in our portfolio to get more than our fair share of any growth that's happening in the marketplace. And when we drive equity and we drive sales growth, we aren't just marketing, we're market makers. So I'm trying to say we're not marketing, we're market makers. How are we making the market and growing the business, and through driving strong value for the brand as well, long-term sustainable growth. So I don't pretend to know how many CMOs have that mindset orientation. I've run into several in my career who are really into the cool shit they're doing. Yeah. And it just gets old. And after a couple of years, it's like, this isn't the CMO for me. So there's a 2.5 year tenure for CMOs. Wow, I got 6 months to go, I guess.
I think you'll outlive it. I think you'll
I hope
outlive
so.
it. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a tricky one. And to your point, like, I think those are all really important elements you just outlined. And it is a balance. I think, to your point, the CEO needs some foundational understanding of marketing, even if they haven't spent time in the function themselves. And to your point, the CMOs need to kind of rise to the occasion and be a good business partner and drive the business and talk about it in those terms. So yeah, no, I agree. It's great advice. Well, I want to switch gears. My favorite question to ask people that come on the show, I'm going to ask now, which is, on a personal level, has there been an experience of your past that defines or makes up who you are today?
Interesting. I'm going to go back to my parents. Sorry. It always comes back to your parents. But my dad, as an art history teacher too, just never allowed us to have coloring books. And, very much about, you can create your own coloring books. It's okay to draw outside the lines, and that sense of creativity and exploration and learning. So we were constantly learning. I never went and got my MBA, just life happened. I never was able to do it. And there was years where I was quite intimidated with all these hotshot MBAs that I was working with and advising. And so I sort of overdid it on the self-learning side. I have more books in this room than, and I think I could go toe to toe on any topic that any MBA might bring up, or any MBA professor for that matter. And so that constant learning, I don't seek knowledge, because knowledge, if you know, you stop learning. I seek learning, the learning experience. Things are always changing. So something's changing. I need to learn again. Like, what assumptions are we making? What's the status quo? How do we challenge that? Is that still true? Is it not? So that constant thirst for making sure I got the pulse of what's happening in that constant learning, I think it's still at a very, very young age. And I appreciate that more than I realized growing up in it. We went to art museums more than I went to the movies.
Yeah. Well, I'm still trying to wrap my head around no coloring books.
Yes. I would go over my girlfriend's house and sneak them, but
okay.
it was a strict rule.
That's funny. Well, I mean, that's a great gift, though, the gift of knowing how to learn and to thirst that, I guess, so to speak. What advice would you give your younger self if you're starting this journey all over again?
I think I'm still learning of what that advice would be. I've done this exercise a number of times. I think I've been very destination focused in my career ambitions, that next promotion or that next big hit. And when I look back, it was the journey that I loved. It wasn't the destination. It was the stories I tell about working on a project with a team in an all-nighter situation. Those are like, enjoy the journey is probably what I tell myself, and not worry about where you're headed, because that'll come. Just enjoy the journey and do the great work. And I think I would say, having worked in some very big companies, get a little more political savvy quicker. You have to navigate political waters, and I've worked in some Shark Tanks. So, I was very naive and Pollyanna about a lot of things. But yeah, I don't know how you get more savvy faster. I don't know if it's possible.
I don't know either, but I would love that easy button. I mean, I like the advice, though. To your point about the journey, those are the things we look back on and remember most, right? Like, I don't even remember when stuff happened. I remember how it happened.
Exactly. Remember that dream team, and you didn't realize it was a dream team at the moment. And then now we've all gone our separate ways and done amazing things. And you look back and you go like, wow, that 2-year period at Frito-Lay, I think there were 130 marketers and I think 70% are in C-suite jobs now. See, it's incredible. Or owning their own companies and thriving. It's just we've been keeping track of it, Ann and I. It's like, wow, that was a real dream team, some real talent there. You've got CMOs and all over.
Well, on this quest for more knowledge or learning for learning's sake, are there topics that you think marketers need to be learning more about, or you're trying to learn more about yourself right now?
Well, I've been very steeped in the metaverse, having entered it. There's nothing like doing it and to learn it, that's for sure, if you have an opportunity. But there's books being written on it now that keep coming out. I'm really curious about where that's going to go. I have a Gen Z child. I'm an empty nester, but my 23-year-old grew up, in these platforms or games where they're meeting people and becoming friends, and they haven't even met in person, right? But they are actually like friends and have met up since then, and you've met on a gaming platform. So I think the metaverse will be the next social platform more than anything. And, I hung out with a couple thousand people on the dance floor in the metaverse with my avatar. And it's quite interesting. It'll get better as, the technology gets better, and it needs to go mobile at some point. And then if you think connected commerce, how Web3 is going to change things, I would definitely say any marketer needs to be keeping an eye on that.
No, that makes sense. Well, two more questions for you. Are there brands or causes or companies that you're following or you think other people should take notice of?
Enamored with cross-brand collaborations. I don't know if you've seen the Gucci Adidas logo, the combined logo.
I have not, no.
It's very cool. And I've been trying to find out how I can buy a Gucci Adidas product. It's not easy to find, but these cross collaborations are really interesting. Like they're almost like it's not a borrowed equity of one and the other. It's a combined equity to create something different and unique. So that one's got my attention.
I need to check that out because, to your point, that's a whole new mental space as I think about that, Adidas and Gucci.
I have it as sort of my wallpaper on my phone right now because I just stare at it. It's like such a cool logo. Who'd have thought? But I think, more of that could happen. So what does 1 and 1 equal 3 versus, usually, especially in spirits, you have all these celebrities, borrowed equity. It's very temporary. It's not, I don't know. We're studying it actually. We don't do a lot of celebrity work, but we're trying to figure out if we do it, how do we do it? How do we do it so it really works? And some have worked. So we're figuring that out. It seems like, I'm watching a lot of ads and there's a lot of celebrities and a lot of ads. So there's something maybe just cultural right now that's what's getting people's attention.
Well, it's definitely a cheat or a hack into culture, right? But to your point, I don't know that I've ever seen any studies around like what's the longevity of the impact, right? Like if I take the easy button and I pay to make that happen, like is there a long tail or is it a shorter tail than if I were to do some of the other stuff you talked about, like the instigations that may be more organic in some ways? Well, last question for you. As CMO, what do you feel like is the largest opportunity or threat facing marketers today?
War for talent. We have so many openings we can't fill. It's so we, just having to think differently about how we're recruiting, who we're recruiting, where we're recruiting, where do they have to live, where do they have to work. It's total change the game. And then as a leader, how do you have a company culture? How do you have engagement? How do you make sure it's not a transactional relationship when we're not living and working in the same space every day? How I grew up working very different. I think the next generation will grow up working, and it isn't just marketing, but in general. So culture is our company, it's like the most important thing. Pernod Ricard believes its culture is its unique differentiating benefit. If you go on it's a French company, and the purpose is creators of conviviality. And that's a French term, but it really means we've dug deep, like to translate to American, it's really about unlocking the magic of human connections. And that's our purpose. And that's what our company purpose is. And our brands are all in line with that purpose. So things like hate speech online, we have to be against because it's anti our purpose. So we started Engage Responsibly and gifted that to the ANA. Now 85 companies have signed on. We need to tackle hate speech online. It's not good for our brands. It's not good for human beings. It's not good for our social environment. So our culture is so critical to our company, and it's what attracts a lot of people to our company. I came here because of your culture was different than other cultures I've worked in. But how do you maintain that in a virtual environment, in at a time where you may not get together physically as often as you need to instill that culture? So that's really what's been on my mind, keeping me up. Like, what do I have to do intentionally, purposefully in this virtual working environment? It's really a challenge.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. And it's not getting any easier as as the employment, everyone becomes almost fully employed in aggregate, if you will. I know there's subsections of consumers that are not as employed as others, but there's just less and less people to find to do the job, to do the work. And so I love how you described how your culture makes a difference. And it is a challenge to try to figure out how to make that happen in a virtual or hybrid working environment. But well, Pam, this has been phenomenal. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me, with support from my team and podcast editors, sound engineers, and writers at Share Your Genius. Find them at shareyourgenius.com. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe on marketingtodaypodcast.com and tell your friends and colleagues about the show. I love to hear from listeners. You can contact me on marketingtodaypodcast.com. There, you will also find complete show notes, links to what was discussed in the episode today, and you can search our archives. I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.